Hi, I'm Stan from Results Marketing Partners, where we focus on creating a comfortable, no-pressure experience connecting buyers with quality product and service providers. We do this in three ways: by providing targeted education for making purchasing decisions that are right for you rather than based on hype, and we encourage productive communication before a single dollar is spent, and finally we foster fulfillment that lasts long past the purchase date. I'd like to introduce to you Larry Stauffer from Larry's Home Designs, a gentleman that I've had the pleasure of working with for a number of years on several fronts. First, as a draftsman for his custom home design company, and secondly, also managing his marketing division. And I'd like to introduce Larry to you and dig into the background a little bit, but also, before we get started, I want to mention the main points that we'll be looking at today. First, as I mentioned, is what Larry's Home Designs is all about. Second is clearing up confusions about SIPs, that's Structural Insulated Panels. Third is standard construction versus SIPs. Fourth is determining whether SIPs are right for you. Fifth is the financial impact of using SIPs. Everybody's worried about the money, and for good reason. And sixth, and finally, is what is involved in taking full advantage of SIPs for your project. So with that said, Larry, let's dive into this, the beginning question about what your company is all about. What's your story? How did you get started in the home design business?
Good question. I get that asked that a lot. It's actually an accidental story. My dad and my older brother started a construction business at the time when I was unemployed. I had worked for an architect, and then after that a home builder. And when I was unemployed, my dad and my older brother started their own construction business. And Dad, hating paperwork, said, if I get any design work, I'm going to give it to you and you can bill the client directly. Well, that just got me thinking outside the box, and long story short, I did 8 projects as an independent designer my first year. I think 13 the next, and then from there it just snowballed, and it's been 24 years now and a lot of different states later. Wow. And at their highest point, I think we did 173 jobs in 1 year. So that's quite the advance from 8 projects in the first year, but it's been a great ride. We're doing a lot of custom homes throughout the United States and not just staying local anymore. Right. And we're loving it.
How do you get your clients mostly?
There's 3 different ways I get my clients: by individual homeowners in the local area where I live, which is Lancaster, Pennsylvania, but also I have a network of builders that they are getting their own clients, okay, and they bring their customers to me. Sometimes I meet with them face to face. Sometimes I don't see their customers at all and just meet with the builder. Okay. And then the third way is where a lot of your work comes in with the marketing team, is on the website. I mean, I've had calls now 2 to 3 times a week about projects, on just prospecting mostly, but they're also very interested in what we do, it seems somehow, based on all the information on the website, that they're actually getting educated before they make a phone call, and they are comfortable talking with somebody versus just sending a no-name email and expecting some kind of canned response in return. But those are the 3 aspects of how we get exposure, and then from there it's just word of mouth.
Sure.
People like it and they keep on going, and they tell a friend who tells a friend, and we keep going.
Great. We've had, which having worked with you and still working with you both in the design aspect as well as the marketing, I'm kind of very closely involved in a lot of the emails and customer service stuff that you're involved in as well. So just want to ask, what are some of the reasons that clients looking to design and then build their new homes, mostly first-time dream homes a lot of the time, some additions and so forth, but why do they choose you compared to other options out there, especially when you know that they've been looking elsewhere? What are some of the reasons?
I think it comes down to 3 words: education, education, education. Everybody that's looking, it's going to be a big step. They're spending tens of thousands, in some cases of custom homes, hundreds of thousands of dollars. And they want to know exactly where their money is going and how their money is going to be spent and how much say-so do they have in the whole process. And I think based on all the information that's on the website and what I tell them on the first phone call, it takes a lot of the, I shouldn't say guesswork, but a lot of the discomfort and the uncertainty out of,
That's a good way to describe it.
out of what they're getting into. Because I just tell them I hold their hand, technically speaking, the whole way through. And I think it helps that I'm available 6 days a week up until 8 o'clock at night.
Okay.
And that helps from coast to coast. And
Very flexible with
very
their
flexible.
time needs.
I can, on minor changes, if a design is in progress, I'll make a small change on the fly and get it to them in time for a meeting with a builder or something.
Sure.
But yeah, it's all about education. It's not rocket science. It's just straightforward one-on-one approach, and it keeps them going.
Right. My next question, I don't want to say this or come across as putting any other design service or architects down out there. But based on the recent email that we had just this week, actually, from a guy looking to design and build what he called his dream home, and he had a very bad experience with several other service providers. Could you explain a little bit about that and what he went through? Again, this is just for the sake of clarity and to help you guys who are watching this video understand some of the challenges that are going on within this field, and to how to help you think better through what to look for when you're at the point of choosing a designer for your service.
I think the difference is in approach. The designer or the homeowner that you're talking about, he ran into people that think the homeowner knows nothing. The architect and the designer that homeowner in question spoke with, I think I got the feeling from the email that he really was a know-nothing and they know everything, and they're going to tell him what he needs to do.
That's a fair assumption, yes.
Because, and then they're going to tell him what prices that he's going to pay for design work and kind of shove their ideas down his throat when he's the one that's going to be living there for the next 20, 30, 40 years.
And that was straight out of the email. The guy was complaining
Straight
about
out of the email.
not being heard, not having a
Yep.
voice.
He said he was not getting heard. He wasn't. His ideas were not being listened to. They just wanted to push their thoughts. And I think ultimately those types of architects and designers, again, not knocking the good ones.
Right, because there's
But,
plenty of not
oh yeah, and
this is not about competition in one sense. There's plenty of work to go around
Absolutely.
right now. It's a booming industry right now.
but I think they just look at themselves as the professionals, and they have all the answers. When in reality, we have no idea what goes through a person's daily routine.
Right.
You know, does he want that coffee pot in his bedroom, which calls for a little kitchenette behind the closet door? Does he?
Right.
Does he have a dog bath in the mudroom? You know, whatever.
I remember that project.
Yeah, it just comes down to you gotta. It's like going up through a drive-through McDonald's and not getting what you order, but you have to pay for it.
Right. That's a good analogy.
It's just frustrating when I hear that kind of stuff.
Sure. So before diving into the actual SIPS part of this interview, I'd like to clarify one thing, also for the sake of you viewers' understanding. Larry, just based on a few words that we touched on here so far, the words architect and designer, I was wondering if you could, for the sake of the viewer watching this as they look whether to hire a designer or an architect or you or someone else, just for their part of the mix of helping them make that decision, which is very important because they'll be living there, like you said, for 30, 40 years, maybe the rest of their life. Maybe sooner, depends what the situation is, but it's going to be their home. And as we all know, your home is your castle in one sense. And so could you explain the difference there of what your service provides, like what you are regarding architect, designer, and then why that's important to them? Not that one's better in one sense than the other, but just for the sake of understanding what's available to you as a buyer with options to consider.
Let's first define architect. Architect is a guy who has gone to probably at least 5 years of college, 2 years minimum of internship. It might vary in some states depending on their requirements, and then gone through some type of exam, and then he gets his license. Okay, that's great.
And what does that license qualify him
That
for?
license qualifies him to do a lot of different stuff. He can do commercial, he can do residential, he can do multifamily units based on all the codes, and he can put his seal on it, which transfers any kind of responsibility in the design process onto his own name. And he's well versed in the codes, big stuff like multiple family units, like I mentioned, the fire separation requirements, all the exits, anything that's pertaining to that. I'm just touching on it very briefly.
That's code related.
That's all code related stuff.
It confirms what's necessary.
Yeah, and even all that stuff applies in the commercial aspect, but it's so much so that he's studied all that in school, so he's much more educated. But on the flip side, as a designer, I am legal as well to design residential dwellings, multifamily units, some light commercial.
I was going to say that, yeah.
I'm a member of the American Institute of Building Design, actually a president of a local chapter.
Okay.
And what that qualifies me for is I can design it, but I don't have a stamp to put on it to say that this has been totally verified according to the building code. But most states don't require a stamp for residential design.
That's good to know.
I know the codes, just like the architect does. I can verify it if needed with the local government. Like a township says, hey, we need this, and I'll point out in the code where I saw what I saw and say, I'll argue a point, maybe it's happened in the past. But also, most states allow designers to operate without a license as far as an architect's seal. So that allows me to operate pretty much unhindered across the United States. However, there are areas where they do require a structural engineer seal or an architect seal.
Beat me to it. I was just going to ask about that.
So I'm covered. I work with architects. I work with engineers that are licensed.
Architects and engineers?
A couple architects, but mostly structural engineers. Okay. And now there's a fine line between structural engineers and architects to a point. There's a huge difference in a sense, but both are legal in stamping drawings in the different states, in all the states actually.
And they both know the codes?
Yes.
Okay.
But if a good if a good structural engineer doesn't know a specific area, he'll say, I'll stamp it for the structural aspect, and we'll put notes on to make sure that all the beams are sized properly and everything.
Right.
But then he says, I don't feel comfortable with the codes in the case of a multi-family dwelling, and then we'll go to an architect and get his input and put his seal on it and get it stamped. I've never actually had a job where I had to have two seals on it.
Okay.
I'm currently working on one right now. It's a 3-story multi-family dwelling, but or actually an apartment unit. But big bottom line difference when it comes to pay is I can't charge as much as the architect or the engineer does because I don't carry the liability, so I don't have to cover that.
Sure.
But then when they review the drawing, their time on the project is actually very limited. So their fee, although it's a lot higher per hour than mine, is going to be less versus if they would have designed the whole project start to finish.
So just to be clear, your service is kind of a hybrid service that benefits the end client, the homeowner, of getting everything that's legally required, but for the majority of the project duration, they get a savings on the cost incurred for that project.
Huge savings.
Okay.
Yeah.
Could you just dive into a little bit of cost there? Not per project, but just by the hour as an example of what the difference is.
For example, I charge $55 an hour, and an engineer could charge anywhere from $95 and up per hour. Architects lately are ranging $100, $125 an hour.
Okay.
and we all have to go through the same design process.
So you're very
Um,
close to between 40-50% at the lower end less, and 60% less or more at the higher end. So it doesn't take a rocket scientist to calculate those differences.
Yet I have most of the knowledge that I shouldn't say most of the knowledge architects and engineers have, but I have it. I have all the knowledge that's necessary to getting a building
You have the
permit.
qualifications
Yes.
required to. Plus, just as a little add in here, what has been the core of your business is really drawing out the client's thoughts as they develop their own thinking, finalize their own thinking, to bring it into fruition, to enable you to document that in building a set of building plans for the contractors, that it's not just like a drafting service, but you work very closely with the homeowner in getting his thoughts fully fleshed out, that they're satisfied and confident in what they were getting as the end result.
That, yeah, definitely, that's the most important part. But then, in some cases where they are not comfortable speaking with their own township officials, I'll call the official myself and speak with them to see what they need to have fleshed out on the plans to meet local codes, which in a sense, sometimes local codes are more stringent than the national codes.
So the local townships and municipalities have the right to add on to what the IRC codes or,
Yes.
or national codes are?
Yes.
Okay, so that means local knowledge is crucial to their plans.
And that's where it's really paying off with me being affiliated with engineers that are licensed in all 50 states. They know the code state per state. I'm not going to go into detail, but there's all kinds of varieties from state to state.
Okay.
And if I can tell my client, it's happened a lot, is if they call me and say, hey, can you seal the drawings when they're done? I say, no, but I know a guy that can, and I got you covered. So that means one thing. They don't have to go looking for anybody.
Right, so you condense the process for the homeowner.
Yep.
That they don't have to wonder what to look for. You can connect all the pieces
Absolutely.
and key factors as much as they want you to. Some people, like one of your recent clients, I should say, I'm just a subcontractor, is that he wanted to do a lot of the legwork himself, and he did a lot of that, but at the same time, he still had questions that you helped to piece some things together.
Yep.
So it's really about open communication and working individually with each client for what their specific needs are. All right, thank you, Larry. That's very interesting information that I believe our viewers will really appreciate and help them understand what's involved in some of the process of getting our home design and things to look for. Along with that, I want to go into an area that is very critical, I believe, to the home building industry. It's about structural insulated panels, the SIPs, and there's a lot of confusion in one sense out there about it. A lot of questions being asked. People are starting to learn more about it, and I'd like to ask your expertise in helping to clarify this. And to start with, I just want to ask the question, what started your journey into offering SIPs for your home design clients?
Well, it goes back to 2005, I believe. We're just really starting to push on getting new and more clients, bigger houses. And one of the clients said that I got this idea in mind. He gave me this sketch what he had wanted, and he said I really wanted to be super, super insulated. And so that's what got me started looking for something that's beyond the ordinary 2x6 studs with the typical back insulation in it.
Right.
You know, everybody and their brother-in-law does that kind of thing.
We'll get more into that later, perhaps.
So yeah, when what my search revealed was structural insulated panels, and originally all I found was 4x8 sheets with the styrofoam in between them, and they were classifying them as really insulated stuff. But that's the only thing that got my curiosity going. Was I was pushed into looking for that.
Client wanted something
Client
that
desire.
you weren't doing at the time.
And they thought I was the expert on it, which I was an educated one at the time, but I had to educate myself more to get them what they wanted.
Right.
And that's when SIPs turned up, and they've been part of the scene ever since.
Well, truth be told, being an expert in one area that's associated with other things kind of gives you the background for how to start looking into other things that are related in a knowledgeable and helpful way
Oh yeah.
that bears fruit.